episode 17. You guys don't know this, but we were already talking. I made a terrible joke about coffee and poop already, too, and y'all missed it. Thank God. Yeah. Maybe I'll say it again. So, welcome to episode 17 of the Pisces live stream. I can't believe we're already on episode 17. I'm Brandi.
And I'm Shelby. This week we're going deep into your substrate, your filter media, and your fish poop.
And y'all were talking about coffee. I had just said the coffee thing, and y'all were talking about coffee in the chat. And I was like, or coffee might make you poop. So there you go. Yep. So the past 2 weeks, one of these days I'll figure out these technical difficulties and I will not make us record for or talk about stuff for 5 minutes without recording. Cool, bro. Anyway, the past 2 weeks we're talking about beginner topics, and it occurred to me that I really wanted to get into the nitrogen cycle because that's such a big component of your fish tank. I have in my notes that it's either the unsung hero or villain of every fish tank. If you've ever wondered why your tank crashed, why your fish looks stressed, why things might smell weird, chances are the cycle is the root of it.
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about this too, that, you know, I've got 500 tanks and I know what the cycle is. Like, I practice it and I know what to do with it, but I don't know technically what it is and how it happens. So, and I know you are really good with this and can explain this easier for people like me.
Yeah, so I think this is one of those things where the devil's in the details, and sometimes you don't actually need to know the details of what's going on, but sometimes it's can be helpful. The nitrogen cycle is a little complex. When we say we cycle a tank, we're not spinning it or anything like that. Everybody who's new knows this, but sometimes, like, I know this is completely different. Saltwater aquariums, we say that you need to cook your rocks. And a new person thinks that cooking rock means literally putting it on a stove and cooking it. But what we really mean is that it needs to sit in a barrel for like 30, 60 days while it builds up the bacteria and biomass that it needs before you even put it in a reef tank. So that's what cooking means to us. Aquarium speak in general, when we say cycle, we're actually talking about certain things the bacteria do. So everything you put in your fish tank, fish food, the fish itself, snails, plants that might break down, everything produces some type of waste. This waste, when it breaks down, turns to ammonia. It's very toxic. It will kill your fish very quickly. Luckily, there's a bacteria that is going to grow in every single fish tank eventually. It's naturally occurring in the air. The nitrogen cycle is such a integral part to the world itself. It's almost impossible to not have the bacteria populate your fish tank eventually. Might take a while, but it's going to eventually do it. The bacteria eats ammonia. It poops out nitrite. Unfortunately, nitrite is still very toxic to fish. It's not good. Doesn't smell good. Neither one of these smell good. Luckily, there's a second set of bacteria, Nitrobacter or Nitrospiras, who eat the nitrite. And they poop out nitrate. Nitrate doesn't smell as bad. It's not nearly as toxic to fish. If it starts to build up, it can be a problem. But it's a much more manageable chemical in your fish tank than either ammonia or nitrite. Technically, once you have cycled, not on your bike, vibes, once you have cycled your tank, you really should never be seeing ammonia and nitrite. There are times where that might spike up a little bit. We'll talk about that later in the stream. But hopefully you're never seeing it once it's cycled. That's what cycle means. that you have enough bacteria to immediately break down the ammonia to nitrite and enough bacteria to immediately break down the nitrite to nitrate. This can typically take about 4 to 6 weeks in new tanks. I've seen it happen faster. I've seen it happen slower. What's the slowest you've ever had a tank cycle, Shelby? Or do you not even worry about it anymore? I know I don't even really worry about it anymore.
Sometimes, so the only way I ever worry about it is if I'm actually using a different type of substrate, because different, especially for our cycle with our specific substrate that lowers pH, all of them seem to be different. There are some that are like on the dot, 4 weeks, it's ready to go after its water change. Other times it has taken 6 weeks, and then I've had some that's taken like a couple months where like the bacteria isn't growing, it hasn't properly cycled, and that had to do with the substrate. And it was real strange. It was only one specific brand, which I'm not gonna say, but it's one that like it just takes extra long to cycle, but it does cycle, and then now it's like a very steady and really good tank.
So I think that's like the next transition actually is, okay, so these bacteria are working for us behind the scenes, but where do they actually live in our tanks? I think that that's a really good like transition, what you were talking about. I do hear sometimes people say that their cycle stalled, and it's like, your cycle didn't stall. But there are things that can happen that can cause it to take longer. And what you were talking about is a really good example. The bacteria live on the surface. Now, I'm going to get real technical for you for a little bit. A lot of bacteria that are sessile is the word we call when they live on the surface of stuff. They have motile is what we call bacteria who live in the water. They have motile versions and sessile versions. The motile version typically has a flagella or a tail, so it can like swim around in the water. But the reason it's swimming is because it wants to find a surface to land on and to live. So once it finds that surface, it drops its tail like a lizard or a frog, basically. Imagine a frog. It drops its tail, and it starts developing different types of appendages that will help it stick to surfaces rather than living in the water. So when we're cycling our tank, these bacteria are actually growing on surfaces. Listening and relaxing my eyes. I should relax my eyes. Trying to watch the chat while I'm talking, and I get distracted immediately. So all these bacteria are going to try and find a surface. Now, we have surfaces that are more porous where the bacteria can actually like live inside, and surfaces that are like glass, for instance, where there's no real porous or a soft spot for the bacteria to live on. So the more porous the surface, the better environment, that like the better housing essentially you have for your bacteria. So
is that why filter media would be like the most important, and like not over cleaning it or, restarting it?
Yeah, exactly. So like filter media is one of those things that you want to be very careful when it's time to change that out. When you're doing regular maintenances, you do not want to over clean that. That's going to crash everything, right?
Yeah, which is crazy because like I said, at this time, I now know what the cycle is, but previous, when I was younger and we didn't have Google, we didn't have that help, we only had pet stores, which didn't really help you either. Most of those people are college kids that are, they don't care to be there. And I just washed and completely started the tank all over again every time I did a water change. And I'm just baffled by the fact that anything survived. And they must have just survived but weren't thriving. They were growing, but I wonder how much better they would have done if I had done it the right way.
Yeah, like it's crazy because like, all right, I'm a big Taco Bell fan. I know a lot of people don't like Taco Bell because they say it's gross. I've always called it greasy goodness. Like, you need a certain level of greasy goodness. Like if your Taco Bell is too clean, I'm not going to eat there because it's not going to taste as good. So I've noticed this pattern that like if a Taco Bell has like a 99, 9800 score, like its food just doesn't taste as good as the ones that are in the lower 90s. Like we still want it clean. We don't want it gross, but like we need a certain level of greasy goodness. And I think the same thing applies in our tanks. Like we need a certain level of greasy goodness with our bacteria. You want to make sure that you have filter sponges and ceramic media and lava rock that have bacteria in it. So when it's time to clean your fish tank, when it's time to do water changes, you're not taking those things out, washing them completely. You might want to rinse them a little bit, but you don't want to wash them completely and start over. One of the issues also with water changes that you have to be careful with, especially in smaller tanks, is chlorine. So does anybody know what chlorine is supposed to do? Do you know, Shelby?
Kill all the bacteria.
Yeah, it's supposed to kill all the bacteria. So I've seen, especially, I know Shelby sees a lot of our questions that we get from customers, and sometimes Shelby's just like, how do they not know that? That's one of those questions, right? If you do a 100% or nearly 100% water change with chlorinated water, it's going to kill your bacteria because that's what the chlorine does. It kills bacteria. Taco Bell is my preferred imitation Mexican food. It's my preferred fast food of any type of imitated food. Where are we at? And I think I've gotten way off of our script. I think we're talking about what hurts the bacteria, right?
Yeah, like can your tank conditions actually like starve the cycle?
Yeah, so obviously you don't want to do water changes with fresh water that is chlorinated because we don't want to kill the bacteria. If you kill a bunch of your bacteria or all your bacteria, this cycle is going to have to revamp. So normally your bacteria, you have enough bacteria load where ammonia is being switched immediately to nitrate, switched immediately to nitrate. If you reduce your bacterial colonies in any kind of way, then you've got to wait for that to rebuild up. So sometimes you can see spikes in your cycle after water changes, and that's the reason why. If you do a really deep cleaning where you're scrubbing the corners, you're cleaning out the substrate, you clean the filter media, same thing. You've reduced your colony load of bacteria, so it might cause a mini cycle. You might hear mini cycles called. pH is another thing that can impact your cycle very tremendously. So nitrifying bacteria can't work below a pH of around 6.5, and that's because the nitrifying bacteria use a certain form of ammonia, and when pH changes, it causes extra hydrogen molecules to kick off or kick on. If the pH gets so low, the ammonia changes forms to where the bacteria can no longer eat it. So you lose that step in the beginning where ammonia goes to nitrite. So if you're trying to keep what level does a planted fish tank try to stay at, Shelby?
So those ones usually dip down to 6 depending on it. I know that the fluval stratum is what I keep a lot of these planted tanks at, and they do really good, and I believe that's at a solid 6. So that's actually crazy to be hearing because like we do cycle these tanks. Sometimes they take a little bit longer, and I think the ones that take a little bit longer are the ones that drop below 6, and now that is making more sense on why those might take a little bit longer.
Yay! I'm glad that things are making sense. Yeah, and then at a pH below 6, the ammonia conversion is it's basically not happening at all. So around from 6 to 6.5, you're going to see a slower cycle. Below 6, like you're not going to have any cycling happening. Anytime that you're using CO2, like that pH drop can happen. So it's one of those things, like you want to make sure it's not dipping too low. I know we like to, do we like to have low pH planted tanks, or does it just happen
Yeah,
because
so
CO2 is acidic?
so we have to have, for our shrimp specifically, have to have very low pH. Um, some of them, the lower the better. They do, like some of our fancier shrimp, they have to have lower than 6, which the plants seem to thrive a lot better in lower pH, which is crazy. There's some that do well in a higher or neutral to higher pH, but like generally speaking, all my stems do so much better in a lower pH.
Now, so plants can still take up ammonia. So if you have plants and you're doing a lower tank, a lower pH tank, it can take some of the strain of the bacteria away because it's taking up that ammonia. So what has to happen is that ammonia has to be taken up, has to be ate by something, whether it's the plants or the bacteria. It's got to be taken up by something. Hey, Camille.
Hey, Camille.
pH around 6.2 to 6.8 is optimal for nutrient solubility. So that's the same for the bacteria. It's funny how all these things, like their ranges that you want them to be in, everything seems to be happier when you can stay in those ranges.
Yeah.
All right. So next section, I think, or is there anything else that I should cover right there about pH?
Nope, I think we covered that.
Okay.
Stephen P. did say that there's sequencing studies published super recently that show that there are nitrifying microbes in low pH.
Yeah, so every single pH band, there are certain bacteria that live in each pH band. But the pH bands that you can find typically survive in completely different environments. Like saltwater, that band is around 7.9 to about 8.3. So there's a different set of bacteria genetics that live in saltwater because that's the pH they need. That's the pH that the corals need. Otherwise, the alkalinity gets pulled out of the coral. So we're getting into too much science, I think. But it's interesting how the inhabitants that have evolved for each environment, for each pH, each temperature setting, whatever it is, deep ocean currents, those bacteria are very different. There's even bacteria. One of my professors used to do research with rotifers, and I used to work in his lab. And he had found specific rotifers, like rotifer species, that lived in the liquid of pitcher plants. And they could not live anywhere else. Like they needed that environment. It's a super low pH because it's a digestive enzyme, right? Super low pH. And if you took it out of that low pH, it was going to die immediately. So all these organisms evolved to live where they lived, and they all work together to try and keep it at that pH. So it's a lot of times it can be hard to get above or below even if you want to.
Yeah. So I think that helps us kind of jump into the next segment too about kind of know how to support these bacteria, but like how do we start the cycle faster? Is there like a better way than waiting 6 weeks? Can we get it to go faster? I know people just want to set up that tank right away. So
well, I think your husband also made a point in the chat. I'm assuming that's not you, that's Grant.
Yeah.
That's why it's important to cycle your tank with the same parameters you plan to run it. So when you're starting your tank, like there are things you can do to jumpstart it, but like knowing where you want to be is super important. If you were running a race and you didn't know where the end is, it's kind of pointless to just run. And if you don't know where you're going, I think that's an analogy that works for everything, especially aquariums. Know where you're going, know where you want to be, set off in that direction to begin with.
Yeah.
A lot of beginners get stuck at that waiting point at the beginning. Nothing's happening. It's boring. They want to add fish. They add the fish, and then suddenly we have ammonia, and things smell bad, and the fish are dying. There are a lot of different ways that this can be overcome. What do y'all do when y'all are setting up a new tank, Shelby?
I leave that to Grant. I'm just kidding. Uh, most of the time I do.
I've never
We
done
pretty
this.
much,
This is all Grant.
yeah. So these, we put the amount of substrate and then they're all the same. So we always start with that substrate. And then he mixes the TDS to 150 is usually generally where we keep our Caridina at. Fill up the tank and he'll usually add Florinbacter 7, which is like a starter. He knows the technical term. I just know which one it's called. It's like a bacteria for
Yeah.
it. And that one's a Brightwell thing. And I know there's something else he adds. He'd probably add it in the comments and make me feel like I should know this. But I know that's something that we do. And then we leave it pretty much for 30 days because we just let it cycle. We don't tinker with it and then do the water change. And then I don't even test them at this point because we've been doing it for so long. We know which substrates we should test for just in case. But like my rack in the room, I just started adding shrimp to it, and I never even tested to see if they're ready, but they were cycled for well over 30 days.
Yeah.
So we're like, yeah, they're good.
Yeah, so like there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You can just wait in time. Like you need to have some type of ammonia source to begin with. So if you don't have any kind of waste for the bacteria to eat, the bacteria aren't going to start growing in the aquarium. So that's your first step. So you need some type of waste. Once you have some type of waste source, whether you're feeding a little bit, you put in a little piece of shrimp, like a dead shrimp, not a live shrimp. There's different things that you can do to have some ammonia start. Some people even actually just put ammonia in their tanks. Back in the day, people used to pee in their tanks because that's ammonia. The first time someone told me to do that, I thought the guy was just messing with me, and then I realized like, oh, some people do that.
Imagine one of those tanks, me having to pee in one of those. No, 6 feet in the air.
Yeah. Yeah. I have all kinds of jokes in my head, but all of them are inappropriate, so I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it there. Anyway, so that's one thing that you can do. Another thing that I actually tend to do is I have a sump down here, and I have it full of rock. And that's so that if I ever need to set up a hospital tank or get another tank set up quickly, I can pick up that rock that's full of the bacteria and put it in the tank, and it's essentially immediately cycled because that rock already is full of all the substrate, is full of all the bacteria that it needs to go from nitrite to go from ammonia to nitrite to nitrate. Now, as the bioload increases, or how much I'm feeding or whatnot, that I might need more bacterial colonies to be able to support that quick transfer of chemicals. But if I'm setting up a small tank, more than likely it's enough to support that. What you're talking about also, you can buy bottled bacteria. We actually just started, I don't think it's even for sale yet. We just started a media product that has the bacteria already colonized in it. And we have the vats of the media growing with bacteria in it so that we can essentially send off bacteria that's ready cycled, so people don't have to keep a second tank. I'm pointing to it like you guys can see it. So people don't have to keep a second tank running with substrate so that they can cycle quickly.
And to me, I feel like this is necessarily a little bit cleaner this way too than just getting someone's, sponge from their tank. Or
That's what I thought you were
bacteria.
going to say when I first asked. Like that. What do you mean by sponge in the tank?
Yeah. So most of us have like the sponge filters for shrimp because then they don't get sucked up. So I know a lot of people that do sponges that they buy from other people, which kind of worry me sometimes because other people have algae and other things that necessarily you want at once starting up a tank. Who would want to start something and already have issues to begin with and that's like working backwards instead of moving forwards with the tank. And it could discourage people. And that's why when I saw this product, I was super excited, and I was like, oh, I hopefully they could do like a sponge filter in there. It'd be so cool, just to give that extra little boost, especially because the new ones have the little ceramics, which are pretty cool. There's different like types of balls which you could put on like a hang on the back filter and it'd still do really well. But for like our shrimp people, we got to figure out something too. But these cans were so cool too.
I
It
think I
kept
have a
stopping
picture. I'm
people.
trying to see if I can pull it up.
Oh yeah, that was so cool. It is a neat project, and everyone kept thinking they were like energy drinks every time they walked by our booth. It was so much fun.
There we go. Let's see. Yeah. So this is the new product that we just came out with that we're talking about. And these are really, really porous medias. And the bacteria has been grown on them already. So like I said, bacteria grows on a substrate, not in the liquid. And so we're basically packaging them up and sending them on their way so that people can have maybe not instant tank cycle depending on the size of the tank, but certainly should reduce the time it takes to cycle a tank.
Yeah, those round ones too would probably be really great for a shrimp tank setting up. Because even if we don't have to hide them, you could just put them in the tank. I mean, it would be funny to watch shrimp crawl all over them. And the more surface, obviously, the better bacteria for our shrimp tanks. And we always say that because the biofilm grows on them, and that's what shrimp eat. That's their main source of food. So
I wonder if the shrimp are actually eating the bacterial, like the nitrifying biofilm, or if it's different things, if it's algae. I don't know anything about shrimp, so that's something I
yeah.
definitely
They don't
am.
actually eat algae at all. They eat the biofilm and the bacteria on the algae. That's why some people think that they do. There's some that almost pretty much do, but what they're doing, because algae grows with the bacteria, so they're taking care of that. That's what's causing the algae to bloom. So it like depletes a little bit, and they think they're eating the algae, but they're not. They're eating the stuff off the algae.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah, just like dying plants. They're not actually eating the dying plant. They're eating the stuff coming off of it.
Yeah, because like I have a microscope back here too. If you guys ever take any water samples and put it underneath a microscope from your fish tank, you would be shocked at the amount of microbial life that is in your water. It's insane. Just things all over the place. They're hunting each other. They're working with each other. They're doing all kinds of. It's like Horton Hears a Who. I love looking at it.
Yeah, and one thing I definitely want to ask you, because I know you'll probably know the answer too. So it even says like full ammonia spikes. You'll notice cloudy water, fish acting weird, and maybe a diatom bloom. So is there a difference between that? Why would there be cloudy water? Because I do have that happen all the time in our shrimp tanks, and like most of them are good, but like we'll always have that one that's doing that where it's got cloudy water.
So cloudy water could be a couple of different things. The first thing I think of whenever I see cloudy water is I think of a bacterial bloom, which means something has happened to cause the bacteria to replicate outrageously. And again, normally that bacteria wants to live on surfaces. So if it gets up into the water column, and sometimes it might be that, so the bacteria is like skin cells eventually too. Like all the dust in your house is actually dead skin cells, or a lot of the dust in your house is dead skin cells. So the bacteria is going to start to die. I know, it's really gross. Yeah. Bacteria is going to start to die. So while you don't want to do too big of a water change because you don't want to disrupt your colonies, you also need to remove some of the dead bacteria cells so that there's more spaces for the bacteria to live. Sometimes it could be that the bacteria are going from sessile back to motile. So they're up in the water column trying to find a new place to go live. Bacteria tend to be very good at life. So sometimes a cloudy water might be that it's too dirty and it needs to be cleaned. Sometimes it might be that it was cleaned too much, and so you've got a big bloom of the bacteria going crazy because they've got suddenly a ton of food. They're not limited in any kind of capacity. But most of the time, cloudy water means bacteria for me. And those mini cycles, basically, they can happen when you either clean your tank too much or you don't clean it enough. Sometimes if you add something to your tank, like the chlorine or some type of medication that kills the bacteria, and then they have to repopulate. Again, if you kill a whole bunch of them, then suddenly they're like, oh, I have lots of food. I'm going to have lots of babies. They'll get up in the water column. One thing to be careful about is if you're seeing that is the bacteria are living organisms. So they're breathing just like your fish are. And that means they're taking up oxygen. So if you have cloudy water, the first thing you want to do is get some agitation in there. So that way you make sure that you're adding lots of oxygen to the water for the bacteria so you don't have them suffocate, and also so that they don't suffocate the fish. Was that your question?
Yeah, that answers it a lot. I think, well, my tank that actually has it occurring, it doesn't have anything but like a few shrimp in it. So maybe it just doesn't have any surface for it to like cling onto. And that might be a little bit of the issue.
Yeah, sometimes it might even just be the place that you're at. Like if it's underneath a AC register or something, it might be getting more debris from the air, more bacterial cells from the air. So there's so many things. Like whenever I get questions from people, I'm always like, send me a picture. Let me see what we're talking about. I never start answering things without a question or without asking more questions. I answer questions with questions. Let's see. Right. I have water changes are key, but you need to do them consistently. Small water changes every week or every other week. Make sure you're using dechlorinated water. You want to vacuum the substrate, but not so much that you're taking out all your bacterial colonies. You want to rinse the media in tank water, not tap water, or dechlorinated water. I'm going to be honest, a lot of times I use tap water, but if I'm cleaning a filter, I don't clean anything else in the tank. Nitrates can start to get high if you're not doing regular water changes, which is, while they're less dangerous than ammonia and nitrate, which is the end result of all the bacteria, can eventually kill your fish and will eventually smell bad. If your pH is too low, it can kill off the cycle because basically it starves that first step because the bacteria can no longer eat the ammonia. Yeah, I think that covers all the basic things for cycling. Am I missing anything?
No, it seems to wrap it all up. I mean, to put it in short summary, I guess it's if the nitrogen cycle's working, you barely notice it, but when it's not, you definitely notice it. So with the smell to the sight to the fish not acting right
or dying.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we're at a little over 30 minutes, so make sure that you start the tank smart. I think that was a really good point, Grant. Start the tank smart, keep your pH stable, give your bacteria plenty of places to grow. If you're starting fresh, try and use some type of seeded media, bacteria. We would suggest using ours. It's not mandatory, but it's a good option. There's lots of options on the market though. All those, when you're adding bacteria to your tank, it takes a lot of the guesswork out from the beginning. So you're not just guessing whether or not the cycle is done. So thank you all for watching. Answering a question with a question is wiser than my approach of blurting out an answer right away. That's something that I realized very early on, is that every aquarium is different. And if you're just immediately assuming you know what someone's problem is, then you probably are off base. There's a chance that their aquarium is just like yours, but it's unlikely. So anybody who's giving advice without asking questions first, I'm always suspect of. So don't make me suspect of you. All right. Thank you guys. Make sure you